So what makes an image edited in the right way? What are the factors that contribute to a good image? Well, apart from the factors you would use in capturing the image with the camera, the factors that you would have to use while editing an image are pretty simple, but it takes time to master them. These three things are light, color, and detail. Now, light is about how bright your image is, how dark those shadows are, how bright those highlights are, and all of those that contribute to the image and the subject being clearly seen to those who see the image. And if we miss any of these while keeping the other two, the image is incomplete. If I have a perfectly exposed image, I have balanced the highlights and the shadows, I have the colors, they're well saturated, the colors are, they have harmony among them, but my image is blurry, then I have not edited my image the right way. The other way around also works. If I have the perfect colors, I have the perfect detail, my image is sharp, the colors are matching, but it's underexposed. So if I edit an image if I edit an image while skipping out on any of these factors, the image would be incomplete. So whenever you're editing any type of image, whether it's black and white, whether it's a macro image, if it's a sci-fi image, any style, any category, these three factors need to be in that image. Now I'm going to get into I'm going to be more specific with what each of these are and what they're shown as in Lightroom. So when we look at any photo editing software, we do come across each of these tabs. I'm mainly focusing on Lightroom right now, but you would be able to find any of these in any other software. So let's start with light. Light is composed of the following categories in Lightroom. The first thing that you see when you want to edit an image would be below the white balance, would be the tone of the image. And that counts for the lighting of the image, the exposure, how bright or dark the overall image is, the contrast, the difference between the lights and darks of the image, highlights, the brightest parts of the image, whites, the white parts of the image. This is more general compared to this. Shadows, the darkest part of our image. Blacks, the dark parts of our image. When we control each and every single one of these, we are controlling the lightness of our image, which allows us to see the other two parts of the image. So if there is no light in the image, I cannot see the colors or the detail to begin with. So I would say the light is the most important thing. The same thing goes for us. If we see a world without light, if all the lights were turned off, there was no sun, we cannot see any color or any detail in our daily lives. So light plays a big part in everything. And without light, we wouldn't be able to see color or detail again. So when you edit an image, you want to make sure you are adjusting every single one of these to make your image seen and for the subject to be well lit. So we have gotten into these. We will get into these in the following lectures. You'll learn how to control each one and what each of these do when looking at the example image. The next section is color. Now, the things that contribute to color in Lightroom are vibrance, saturation, color luminance, temperature, and tint. Hue and saturation, the hue also counts for this, and the calibrations, but those are something that you would want to add on to. They're not as vital as these are. That's why they're not included here. So what is vibrance? Vibrance targets the parts of the image that aren't that saturated to begin with. So if we have a sky that is a really light blue color, we would need to use the Vibrance tab to bring more color to that area. And saturation, these two do get a bit confusing. A lot of times when you start out, you wonder which one is what, which one should you use first, and that is completely normal. What saturation does is that it controls the intensity of that color. So if I had that really pale sky and I brought some vibrancy to it, I can now adjust how intense I want that blue color to be. If I move the saturation up, it would be very intense. It would look almost cartoon-like. And if I bring it all the way down, I'm removing all intensity, making the image colorless. When you are editing an image, you want to first start with vibrancies to set the color out, to identify and pick out those colors first, and then adjust how intense you want those colors to look. The next thing is color luminance. Luminance stands for the brightness, and color is the color. So we're talking about the brightness of the color. Again, let's use the sky as an example. The blue sky, do I want the blue to be light or do I want the blue to be darker? Now, this is not talking about the shade of blue, it's talking about the brightness and darkness of the image. In the following lessons, we'll learn about the how this works and how this is about the brightness and not the shade of the color. Don't confuse these. You shouldn't confuse these, they're not the same thing. The next in line is temperature. Like the name suggests, it's about how warm or cold the image is. And a lot of times temperature is used to balance the colors in the image or to create a certain mood. If you've all watched movies before, and if you look at the flashbacks that the main characters have, a lot of times the warm color, like a warm temperature, is used in that scene to create a warm and friendly area. But when you use cold, it's trying to show something mysterious, something sad, and something that's far off. So you can use the temperature to 1, set the mood, and 2, balance the colors. Let's say if I have a lot of blues in my image, I didn't change them, just like it's an image of the ocean, let's say, with a really blue sky, and we have blue on blue, I would use the temperature to balance it out. The other thing that helps balance an image and give it a mood is tint. Now, tint, unlike temperature, is about we have the slider. It goes to either magenta or green. These two, again, can create a certain mood and can complement the colors that you already have. So we will learn about how these affect an image in upcoming lessons. So don't worry if it's a bit confusing right now. You will learn what they each do. And finally, we have detail. Like we mentioned, an image without detail is an incomplete image because we can't really see the sharpness of the subject. Where is the subject? Even if the image is completely blurred out, you cannot identify the subject, and naturally the human eye would not be able to focus on that. If you're scrolling on Instagram and you see a completely blurred image, that image will not catch your eye, so you would just skip over it. That's why detail is really important. Highly detailed images are what captures the eye. But again, you shouldn't go overboard and add so much detail that the image becomes full of noise and it's looking crooked. We're going to see how that plays out in the upcoming lessons. So the sliders to contribute to the detail of the image include sharpness, dehaze, clarity, texture, noise, and lens correction. Now, sharpness is about the sharpness of the already existing edges in the image. So if your subject is wearing glasses and the edges of the glasses are already there, you would use sharpness to further sharpen the edges of that glasses. You're not adding to anything, you're enhancing what's already there. Now, dehazing is not something related to sharpness, but it does unhaze your image. When you first take an image, it has a kind of a fog over it, and dehazing helps remove that. So it adds a lot of detail to your image. And personally, it's my favorite slider because it can do so much with just moving it a little bit. But again, like any other sliders, you should also be aware of going overboard with this slider. Now, clarity brings out the textures in the edges. So if your edge is not looking as you can barely see it, you would use the clarity to further bring it out. Clarity also affects the areas that don't have edges. So let's take someone's face, for example. If I increase the clarity, not only am I sharpening the lip area, for example, I'm also sharpening and exposing the like my pimples or the texture of my skin. Again, this is not something that you would want to go overboard with. This also affects the lighting of the image too. So it's a really effective tool when you're editing an image, and you want to use it gradually so that your image does not look crooked. Texture brings out the texture of the image. Let's say we're taking a photo of a wooden box. Now the wooden box already has a lot of textures. When we're using the texture slider, we're enhancing the texture of that part and not the sharpness. They're not the same thing. Let's look at another example. If I'm taking an image of an orange and the texture of the orange is there, I'm going to use the texture tab to further bring out the little bumps on the orange. And that texture is something that's used a lot on macro photography or some images that are really close up on a subject or an object. Now, a lot of times when you're working with these, you will end up creating noise. Now, noise comes in two categories. We have color noise and we have regular noise. Noise show up as little dots all across your image, sometimes only in certain parts. But they're already there when you take an image. It's not something that you should worry about when you see it. But when you do use these guys, you tend to increase the noise. So after you're done with these, you need to make sure you reduce the noise to balance out the image. They're going to show up as little dots all over the image. And you just simply need to reduce and smooth out those areas without affecting the edge and the sharpness of the image. We'll see what they look like in further lessons. And lens corrections. Like we mentioned earlier, there are going to be some errors in your lens when you take an image. This is not something you should worry about. It happens to every lens and every camera. And what they look like is, first of all, the corners could be dark or bright. You need to fix that. And sometimes you're giving the image a fisheye effect. And you could fix that effect in lens correction. Or if your image is looking too flat, you could give it that fisheye effect in lens correction. Now, in lens correction, you also have something called chromatic aberration. What this looks like is that, again, it's something natural. It will look like blobs of color. It's normally blue or purple and other colors, and they would show up on the corners or the edges of your object or sometimes the subject. So let's say I have a photo of a drawer, and if I have chromatic aberration, at the edge of my drawer, there's going to be this green line. That is called a chromatic aberration, and I can use it by simply moving, either automatically removing it, telling Lightroom to remove it, or I can manually defringe the color out of my image. We will see what that looks like in further lessons. So these are the principles of any photo, whether you're taking the photo or you're editing the image. Should always keep these in mind, and we're going to see examples of how these affect an image overall. So I'll see you in the next lesson where I will show you the examples and we can talk more about the importance of these guys. I'll see you in the next lesson.